Hi there, it's Dr. Bernstein, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about signal phrases and parenthetical citation. In your summary for our course, you're probably going to need to use at least one direct quote, and in all of your other projects for our class, you're going to need to be using direct quotes from the text in order to support your points. And signal phrases and parenthetical citation are vital to this process of using quotes. So the basic rule is that whenever you use a direct quote from a source, you must put quotation marks around it and introduce it with what is known as a signal phrase. As Diana Hacker points out, a signal phrase often names the author of the source and provides some context for the source material. So the main point here is that you don't just plop a quote into your essay, into your writing. What you need to do is introduce it to signal to the reader that you're about to use a quote. So let me give you a couple of sample signal phrases taken from actual essays that students of mine have written. So the first one is Dr. Bharati Puri, Assistant Professor of Philosophy at the Indian Institute of Technology, points out that Buddhists, so that whole phrase is considered a signal phrase. It's signaling to the reader that a quote is about to appear. So you can see how the writer goes from that signal phrase right into a quote. And what this particular writer is doing is not just stating the name of the source, but for her project, she wanted to emphasize that this person is an expert in the field. So the writer provided a little bit of background information about the trustworthiness, the authority of the source. So that's one signal phrase. Another one is right beneath it. Dalton illustrates how Gandhi used the media to propel his living sermon by providing, and then we get the quote. So that whole phrase from Dalton to providing is a signal phrase introducing the reader to the quote. And then we have a more simple signal phrase at the bottom here. King explains to the clergyman that the demonstrators, and then we get the quote. So what you're doing is you're signaling to the reader that you're about to use a quote, and you also want to make a smooth transition from your signal phrase to your quote, and we'll talk later on in the semester about how you can make your quotes fit smoothly into your sentences. But here are three good examples. I definitely encourage you to maybe take a moment to pause the video now and actually write these sentences down, because even though you're not going to use these exact quotes, sometimes just having examples, especially real examples from real students, can help you later on when you want to borrow a similar strategy in your paper. Here are some verbs that you can use in signal phrases. And again, I suggest that you either pause here and write down all these verbs, or that you go over and do a Google search on signal phrases and you can find lists of verbs that you might be able to use. So I really recommend that you write it out by hand, because of course by writing it, it really becomes more a part of you, or at least go online and print out a list of verbs that you can use in your signal phrases. But here are some that you can use depending on the context. Acknowledges, admits, adds, agrees, argues, asserts, believes, claims, comments, compares, confirms, contends, declares, denies, disputes, emphasizes, endorses, grants, illustrates, implies, insists, notes, observes, points out, reasons, refutes, rejects, reports, responds, suggests, thinks, and writes. So you can see there are a lot of different verbs that you can use. You have to make sure, of course, that these verbs fit within the context of your sentence, but if you're really going for developing your writing and getting into the A range with your essays, you're going to want to have variety in your signal phrases, and you're not always going to want to use the same verbs. So now we're going to move into parenthetical citation. This is very important. At the end of every sentence that includes a direct quotation, you need to use parenthetical citation. And you've been seeing that in the examples. You've noticed that at the end of the sentence, you'll see parentheses with the page number in them. So if you're only focusing on one source in your essay, you just need to put the page number in the parentheses. And notice that the period belongs after the parenthetical citation, not before it. So for instance, if you're writing a summary of King's letter from Birmingham jail, since you're going to introduce King's name in the very first sentence of your summary, anytime you use a quote, and you should use quotes very sparingly in a summary, you will just need to put the page number in parentheses at the end of the sentence. So here is an example. Weber argues that Gandhi was a shrewd political strategist. And then at the end, we have the parentheses, the page number, and then the period. Moreover, he notes that Gandhi felt his life was his message. Well, you don't need to have Weber's name there because it's clear that you're citing from Weber. But if you were citing from a new person in this next sentence, then you would need to put that author's name in either the signal phrase or in the parenthetical citation. So let's look more closely at this issue. If the reader does not know the identity of your source, you need to include the author's name in the parenthetical citation. There is no punctuation between the author's last name and the page number. So you should definitely be writing this stuff down. So if you've already introduced the author by providing his or her last name, just put the last name and the page number in the parenthetical citation. So here's the example. According to many sources, Gandhi viewed the Salt March as a pilgrimage, a living sermon. And since we don't know who the identity of this source is, we don't know earlier on in the paper, and we don't know in the signal phrase, you're going to put the author's last name in the parenthetical citation, add a space, and the page number. There's no parenthesis, there's no comma, there's no P for page number, anything like that, just nice and clean. If you've not yet introduced the author, you need to provide both the first and last name of your author and the page number. So here's the example. According to many sources, Gandhi viewed the Salt March as a pilgrimage, a living sermon. Thomas Weber, 47. And now you have a very good basic sense of how to use signal phrases and how to use parenthetical citation. So my expectation at this point is from now on in all of your writing, you're going to apply these rules and and start experimenting with varying them, varying your phrasing. So that's it for now. If you have any questions, feel free to post them on our discussion board.